If you build it, he will come. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Hey Guys podcast. After 5 episodes of spooky movies for our October season of Halloween podcast, we're going to shift gears by covering it. Wait a minute, is this about ghosts? I mean, I know it's a baseball movie too, but it's definitely a ghost story, right? Wait, and it's a time travel movie. Just how bonkers is 1989's Field of Dreams? Well, it's probably stranger than you remember, but thanks to a truly exceptional cast led by a peak Kevin Costner, the fact that this really is a time-traveling ghost story with baseball in it ultimately doesn't matter because, well, despite its premise, it just works and does so on just about every conceivable level. Field of Dreams is far from being a perfect movie, but my God, is it ever easy to love.
Oh, absolutely. No, don't be shocked. I can see the look on your face. It is easy to love.
Well, I wasn't, because as always, just to be clear, I don't know how Rob feels about this. I'm finding out, and I was very concerned that he was going to be, it's a piece of shit. I'm like, oh, no.
No, I'm glad you've started off with, first of all, is it a ghost story? Is it a time travel story? Because one thing it is not is a sports movie. It has a sport in there, but it is not a sports movie as we know sports movies. The other thing being, I had this written down as well, because you said, I think I mentioned it briefly last week. You said, is it a ghost movie? It is 100% a ghost movie, just for Shoeless Joe, Ray Liotta, looking like, I would imagine, what a poltergeist looks like if you could see them. Because every time I see, and I'm getting it straight out there, straight away, Ray Liotta cannot play a good guy without you thinking he's going to turn on you. That dude's,
he's got one of those faces.
The look, like, it is so stern, that look on his face.
He gets away with it.
I've seen this film so many times, but I honestly thought he was going to take that baseball and use it, a baseball bat, and use it against Kevin Costner. And I love him in this. I think he's great. He doesn't do much. He's brief, to be fair. But he's just so... And I love Ray Liotta, but his look just does not suit a nice film, shall we say?
Certainly a friendly ghost. Yes. I mean, the problem is he has somewhat malevolent eyes, which is strange for a man who looks like he's always wearing eyeliner. But he has that look about him where you just think at any moment he could go off. And as you say, he could turn, like if he had a baseball bat, even with all the baseball gear, you're like, is he playing baseball or is he here to beat the shit out of me? And there's one moment in the film when the true Ray Liotta, when he goes full Goodfellas, is when they're talking shit bizarrely about Ty Cobb, who, for those who don't know, Ty Cobb was one of those famous baseball players of all time from the, obviously played in a similar era. I think he was voted like the 3rd greatest player of all time, Ty Cobb. And when he's like, we didn't invite him because he was always a piece of shit. He doesn't say that, but something along those lines. And he laughs. And so he's like, oh, there he is. There's Ray Liotta. There's evil Ray.
There's the Henry from Goodfellas. I wrote that down 100%. As well. There's the Henry. That laugh is so I'm going to murder your whole family.
Yeah, he'd been keeping it under the surface for the whole film, but as soon as he had to laugh and act like a human being, basically, it's like, oh no, he's evil as fuck. But to bring it back to the point we start with about it being a ghost story, I mean, you are right. Structurally, this isn't a sports movie. Like, I know we have different feelings about Whiplash. I mean, it's one of my favorite films of the 20th century, and I know you're not as big a fan. But we talked about it before, that Whiplash, despite the fact that it's a drumming movie, what it really is structurally is a sports movie. You could replace drumming with anything. If he was playing basketball instead of drumming, it would be the exact same movie.
I totally agree. It has all the trappings of a sports film, what you would expect a sports film to have. You have the underdog story, you have the montage, you have everything that you would expect from a sports film, even the final game, shall we say. In this, you don't. You have the story of a man, basically, I mean, spoilers, you have the story of a man finding his father again, like finding who his father was, because as he said, and this really upset me, it usually upsets you, but it really upset me, his father was old when he knew him. Now, his father was in his 30s when he had... when he had Kevin Costner, Ray, and I was in my 30s when I had Riley. So Riley is seeing me now as an old, beat-down man, right?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, the thing is, though, in his defense, Kevin Costner does stress that he's 36. And I think it was speaking to the fact that it was a different time, that back in, like, the 50s. But
36 is not old. I'm adding that fact because I was 36 when I had my son.
Dude, I'm 41. I'm not going to argue against you. But if you go back and look at, say, football, that would be our obvious comparison. Or even, Jesus Christ, this movie. Do you notice something about all the baseball players in this film? Despite the fact that they're ghosts,
they're all old as fuck.
They all look old as fuck. And the thing is, they probably were 30. And the point being is that if you go back and look at football, baseball, American football, Jesus Christ, if you go back to the 20s, if you go back to the 70s and the 80s, you see these guys, you're like, that dude's 25? Motherfucker looks 47.
Yeah.
It was just like they lived different lives. They were all on the busters, they were on the beers. You know, in this, they're all chewing tobacco. Men aged differently back in the day.
In the 30s and the 20s, yeah.
Oh, well, even, like I said, right up until the 70s and 80s, you would see these guys who were in their 30s. They just look old as shit. You look at like any photo where people it's black and white, and if you see a guy who's 40, he looks 72. He just looks 72.
Were you as upset as me? And I'm not a huge fan. Obviously, we already discussed it, of the Sandlot, or Sandlot Kids, as we know it in the UK.
Ooh.
Were you as upset as me seeing Art LaFleur and not hearing people calling him Babe?
Oh, dude, he's like, right. Kevin Costner, I was going to call him Mr. Baseball, but obviously Tom Selleck is Mr. Baseball because there was a movie called Mr. Baseball. But in the more kind of grander sense of the word, Kevin Costner is Mr. Baseball. He is second on the list because he is in so many big... If you need a baseball... And usually he plays like the coach because he looks like a coach. In this, I'm still like, all right, you're pushing it. Is he supposed to be a professional fucking baseball player?
Yeah.
But even then, if you go back and watch old footage of Babe Ruth playing baseball, Babe Ruth is what? 200 pounds overweight, looks about 67, and he's the greatest baseball player of all time. Like
it's funny that because
built different.
The best person to ever played Babe Ruth was John Goodman, and you can imagine John Goodman was Babe Ruth was John Goodman.
Yeah, he looked the part.
The size of the guy you would expect.
Yeah, and this wasn't like, if you haven't seen it, John Goodman didn't have to go full Marvel Studios for that role. He wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get shredded for this. They're like, no, John Goodman, we're hiring him because he is ready to go.
Eat another chicken wing, you'll be fine.
Like, well, I mean, he famously ate like 20, 30 hot dogs before a game once, supposedly. But to bring it back to the ghosting, it's a weird, because obviously everyone thinks of this as a baseball movie for obvious reasons. And it's strange because structurally, baseball is absolutely incidental to the narrative of this film, but paradoxically, it's absolutely essential because baseball is the only sport that would work for this film. It's the only sport.
No, it really is. It's the weaving thread throughout the entire film. Like, baseball is bringing everybody together, even though it's not a sports movie, as we've already said. Everything talked about in this film is baseball. I need to take you to a baseball game. This guy played baseball. This guy did this for baseball. Like, everything is, and you wouldn't have it. You wouldn't have, say, oh, I know what The Voice wants me to do. It wants me to build a hockey rink. Like, that's not going to happen.
Just there's something about baseball, and there's a romanticism and a timelessness to baseball, which is essential to this film. And like you said, it wouldn't work with hockey. It wouldn't work with American football. It wouldn't work with soccer, football, whatever you want to call it. It just wouldn't work. There is this inherent romanticism to the sport, which is absolutely essential to making this movie work. And it's also essential, like that whole sense of like classic Americana. This whole movie is soaked in classic scenes of Americana, starting with, a cornfield in Iowa. There are a few things more American. Okay, maybe there's one thing more American. That's like late 80s Kevin Costner. Maybe one thing more American than him, Kevin Costner doing baseball shit. It's just so American. And it's all built on this kind of like our strongest, most positive ideas of what America could be, or what Americana is, kind of thing. In fairness, they have little hints of the other side of it. There's the PTA meeting, which I actually think is a great scene.
Oh, yeah, the whole "we're close to book burning" meeting, you mean?
Yeah. When Annie stands up, and there's this whole undercurrent of like 60s Americana, and that's kind of underplayed, but it's a strange film in that respect. And it was one of the things my wife mentioned after we watched the film, because I asked what she thought, and she said one of her issues was so much of the narrative is just based on the fact that people just have a feeling or they believe things. And she was like, oh, well, it's because it's based on a book. And the film is based on a book called Shoeless Joe. It was actually a short story originally called Shoeless Joe Jackson Goes to Iowa. But then it was such a great idea, they wanted to push it out into a larger novel. And obviously, it never invariably turned into a movie eventually. But the difference is with a book, if you have a feeling, you can really dig into that on the page. You can explain why they have this feeling, or what that means to them personally. Yeah. In a movie, it doesn't it's very hard to kind of translate that onto the screen. So all it ends up is somebody saying, oh, I just have a feeling. And when you watch this film, if you're being critical, 6 or 7 things happen, big moments in this film, and they're completely predicated on someone go, oh, it just feels right.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I'm sure it totally works on the page because you can explain it because you have the inner monologue. But in the film, it almost feels like lazy screenwriting at times, but it's very tricky to get around that on screen.
And if I remember rightly as well from the film, he actually says, I don't know how to explain it. It's just, I think I have to build a baseball field. And then when he starts basically pulling on the heartstrings about his dad and things like that, that's when she lets him build it. Can I go back briefly to, you mentioned what I'm going to call the book burning scene, even though they didn't burn books. That whole small town thing where they were yelling at the PTA and doing all this stuff. Randomly, of all the films I could have linked it to, Footloose.
Yeah, there is a touch of Footloose about it for sure.
Yeah, like you're on about the small town being controlled. I mean, the small town being controlled by a reverend. You know, like that's absolutely insane. But I feel that in the late 80s or early 80s, probably that can happen. You're religious in small town. You are following your religious leader. I totally understand that. But for some reason, I said totally about 4 times in this sentence. I absolutely get that they are leading.
I love how you've got your book of synonyms in your head then. I can't say totally.
No,
absolutely. Positively.
It took me so out of my fucking train of thought there, because I can't say totally again.
I love in all these movies, people have like mind palaces. You've just got like a synonym palace.
Yeah. But it was really weird to link it to Footloose, but you could see that. You could see if you followed that PTA meeting a bit more, they're going outside and they're burning books.
Well, it's kind of showing both sides of Americana, and I think it's a great scene because it allows Amy Madigan, who's really like everyone's fantastic. We'll go into the cast in a moment, and this movie really only works if the cast is absolutely firing. So make no mistake, as we've already stressed, this movie is bonkers. It really is. Like, if you stop and think about it for 2 minutes, this is a strange-ass film. And if you don't get the right people both behind and in front of the camera, this is straight-to-DVD nonsense, basically.
Yeah.
But Amy Madigan in that sequence, she absolutely slays and really kind of sells you on the idea that even though they're living in kind of, middle America, conservative middle America, potentially, they're, from the 60s and they have different views. It's something that's hinted at throughout the film. I haven't read the book. I imagine it plays a bigger part, their history growing up in the 60s and their kind of relationship to counterculture. It's kind of hinted out throughout. I was just happy to see Amy Madigan, who's, as I said, fantastic throughout as Annie, to really get her moment, because everybody in this film gets a speech, like a great speech. Yeah. And that's Amy's in that sequence. And I like the fact that it's not just, because like I said, it's not just romanticism about baseball, which I think we can all just accept. That romanticism of Americana, especially in the 80s, this is Ronald Reagan's America. They did show you the other side of it, or at least hint towards it. But I think they were correct to just hint towards it and then move away from it, because fundamentally, this is, above all else, a feel-good movie.
For Annie as well, it shows the love that she has for Ray, that she's willing to let him go through with this. Like, for everything, she's willing to just put up with it, not put up with it, but to support him through everything.
Is the ultimate ride or die.
Ride or die. I was going to say ride or die because you said it last week on the
she's even better. Like, I kept looking over to my wife. I was like, this is what you should be aiming for. Like, because he's just like, I woke up, I can hear voices, I want to cut, like, make no mistake, I'm going to cut our income in half to build a baseball stadium for reasons I don't understand. And she says yes almost immediately. Yeah, it's unreal.
Let me take that back. Love, I heard a voice in a cornfield telling me to build something, and I personally believe it's a baseball diamond.
Yeah.
Can I do it? Yeah, go for it. It's fine. I'm not worried that you're hearing voices. Not at all. Just go for it.
I think it does. You can not explain part of it, but I think that it kind of adds the importance of the whole 60s counterculture thing of like following your dream, don't sell out, don't be over.
And she is holding on to the 60s era, the love and peace era. She is
and she
grasp that. Yeah.
Well, she's a romantic herself, quite clearly. But, the thing is, the whole film asks you to go on this journey with them, because when I was rewatching it, what was surprising was how quickly this fucking film gets the races and how quickly he gets on board. Supposedly, there was an extra scene where Ray, Kevin Costner's character, he actually goes to a doctor, to a hearing specialist, and says, listen, I'm hearing these voices, because, they were just like, he can't believe this quickly. Yeah. But they were just like, it messed with like the time in the movie. So it's just like, forget about it. Let's just get people on board. Because he's walking around the cornfield. He hears the voices. I would immediately think ghost, but like, haunting. Like, I think it's because of Stephen King. I'm not sure if you've ever read the book In the Tall Grass, but I'm immediately suspect of,
I always think not In Tall Grass, but Children of the Corn, especially if it's in a cornfield.
Exactly the same kind of thing. But basically, he hears the voices and almost immediately says, all right, I'm going to listen to the voice and I'm just going to build a baseball field. So within moments of this film starting, you get like the introduction you'd expect with all the baseball stuff, the black and white pictures, baseball's about nostalgia. It really plants its flag in the ground there and says, this is what this film is about. This is what baseball's about. And then within 2 seconds, it's like, oh no, this is about ghosts.
Yeah.
This is about fucking ghosts.
Amy Madigan, right? I want to bring back an old game that we haven't played for a while. Known for. IMDb's known for. So you get 4 on there.
I have no idea. I'm going to fail miserably. Amy Madigan is one of these people I keep mixing up with like Holly Hunter and stuff like that. I just conflate it with a bunch of other actresses. So we'd be here all day for me trying to find those 4.
Okay, well, I'll tell you soon, we're going to have done 3 of her 4 known for.
Oh, all right. Go for it.
So obviously Field of Dreams, Gone Baby Gone.
Oh, totally forgot about that.
Uncle Buck.
Oh, of course she's in Uncle Buck. Yeah.
John Candy's missus, Yeah,
totally.
Streets of Fire. She's McCoy.
That's what she's known for. Jesus wept.
Yeah.
I've seen all these films. Like Uncle Buck is unforgivable. That I didn't remember that.
I was a bit upset with Uncle Buck. The reason why I brought it up is because of all the films she's done, and she's done 90 as an actress credit. Streets of Fire is one of the 4 that she's known for.
Yeah, that's a strange choice. She's in the bar. Yeah.
In the what?
Who is she?
She's McCoy. She's the one with the hat. She's the one that follows him everywhere. She's the woman who
of course,
he knocks out on the train.
See, even now I'm just like, I forgot who she was. Yeah, she plays a pretty major role in that film.
Yeah, I think she's like 3rd build.
Unbelievable. But it's not just Amy Madigan. Like, everybody slays. Like, obviously Costner, and we'll talk about Costner in a minute. I absolutely adore Costner. It's a shame that we were denied another decade of him being a leading man because of what happened with Waterworld and The Postman. The ultimate, shit the bed back to back. But it was easy to forget just how great of a leading man, how compelling he is as a leading man, and how much obviously of a baseball leading man he is. Above, you could go through your list of, top 5 Costner films, like The Untouchables, arguably Field of Dreams. I would say Bull Durham, which amazingly he did back to back. He did Bull Durham, went straight into this. 2 of the greatest baseball films of all time. He just knocked out back to back. Open Range is a film I absolutely adore. The Western.
Open Range is fantastic.
I remember. It's so easy to forget now because obviously with Yellowstone and everything, Costner's come back into the kind of the mainstream a bit.
Yeah.
But after Waterworld and The Postman, he was really on the blacklist for like a decade. And I remember I watched Open Range, and it was like the early noughties or something, and I had to convince my friends. I was like, no, dude, you need to watch this Western with Kevin Costner, like a fucking Kevin Costner film. I was like, no. It's like, we've all forgotten how awesome Kevin Costner is, and this Western is low key one of the best.
Because it's not starring Kevin Costner did something very good on that film. He let Robert Duvall take front center stage. It was all
he needed to, I think, back then maybe.
Yeah, it was all about Robert Duvall. That's what I mean. And Costner was just like the quiet guy in the background who knows killing. If you haven't seen Open Range, please go ahead and see it. He's absolutely great.
If you take anything from this Field of Dreams podcast, it's that you should absolutely watch Open Range.
Another person that did really well, and usually child actors kind of annoy us.
Yeah.
Gabby Hoffman as Karen in this. I thought she was great.
It's weird because at first I was like, I know who she is, but I couldn't recognize her. And she is the long-suffering, chain-smoking Claire Hoffman from the brilliant, by the way, Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. It's available. You can watch it on Sky at the moment. I think they've actually disappointingly cancelled it after 2 seasons. But
she was also...
she's amazing in that.
She was also Macaulay Culkin's little sister in Uncle Buck.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I could get the whole Uncle Buck thing because she was still a kid. Yeah. I just, seeing her in Winning Time, where she's this kind of middle-aged, hard-smoking woman kind of thing, I just can't. And she's so sweet as Karen in this film. Again, a small role, but how many films are slightly derailed by totally unlikable child actors? Yeah. She's adorable in this. But then the only one who actually stands out as maybe not being great, and it's not his fault, is
Timothy Busfield.
Yeah, it's absolutely Timothy Busfield as Mark. His character gets short shrift. He's just 80s corporate guy, again, with the beard, again. But supposedly in the book, he's a bit more evil. Yeah. In this, he's just annoying. He's just annoying.
You don't even know he's her sister right up until the end. I thought he was just the brother-in-law, the weird, like, my company wants to just rip the heart out of your land kind of
thing. It's
thing.
just the hair. It's like, is it like, I was like, when I was rewatching, I was like, are they brother and sister? I was like, well, I guess they've got the same hair. He's like a budget Richard Dreyfuss, basically. But I don't want to blame him.
No, do you know why I want to blame him?
Why's that?
Why I think he's phoning it in? Because I think he was the air was let out of his sails a bit. I reckon. I'm pushing into facts here a little bit. Burt Lancaster, who played the older Doc Graham.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
He was unaware that Timothy Busfield was part of the cast, and he had him fetch him water and chairs before realizing Busfield was going to be in the scene with him.
That's amazing.
The
problem is, if Burt Lancaster asks you to go get him water, you get Burt Lancaster water.
You totally do it. But I reckon it took the wind out of his sails, and he was like, you know what? I can't be fucked with this film now. Burt Lancaster doesn't know who I am.
Oh, it's harsh. But to bring it back around to Burt Lancaster, and again, the other side of this coin, because he is, and again, I don't want to give him too hard a time because he's given short shrift. His character is just kind of there for a narrative purpose, but he's not kind of, they don't give him enough to work with at all. He's just annoying, and that's his character trait. Burt Lancaster and James Earl Jones, on the other hand, my God, they're fantastic. And when I think of Burt Lancaster in this role, what I immediately think of, and I may have mentioned before, is the Wayne's World 2 sequence where they cart off the old guy at the gas station because he's a rubbish actor, and they bring in Charlton Heston. Gordon Street. Oh yes, I once knew a girl on Gordon Street, but that was a long time ago when I was a young man. It's like, if you need a guy for this role, because again, some of the dialogue he's delivering is quite cheesy. Make no mistake. You need somebody with all the charisma in the world and all that kind of gravitas that comes with it. And that's what Burt Lancaster has. And it's another one of those roles. Like, if it isn't Burt Lancaster or, Charlton Heston or someone who brings real weight to the role, that whole sequence with Moonlight Graham, which is low-key and very sneakily fucking insane, it just doesn't work.
Sorry, I'm not too sure if you said it. You probably did, but it brings a gravitas to the role.
Yeah,
and
absolutely does.
Even to, like you said, some of the lines he says. There was a line that I absolutely love, only be delivered by somebody from the 30s, and delivered perfectly by Burt Lancaster. After he takes the hot dog out of Karen's mouth, she's fine. She'll be doing handsprings in no time. Nobody else knows what a handspring is.
Yeah.
Except the guy from the 30s.
That sequence is really weird as well, because when I was growing up, that was one of the few okay to cry moments in movies. Like, people probably, it might even feel antiquated now, me saying this, because we live in a different time where it's okay for guys to cry. I tell you what, sure as shit wasn't okay for me to cry when I was younger. I tell you that much right now. And there was maybe 5 movies where it was socially acceptable to say you cried. And I think this was one of them, where he takes the step across the line. It's slightly undone by the fact that everyone's like, we need a doctor. And all he does is give her the lightest pat on the back and everything's fine. But
I mean, nobody else could tell she was turning blue.
I know, give her a pat on the fucking back. But it was like this, The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, The Lion King, or more recently, the start of Up, which is absolutely crushing. But, there was only a handful of films which supposedly it was okay to cry, and I think this is one of them. But that whole sequence...
You've missed one for me.
So. I'm sure I've missed a couple, but...
Hardball, where G-Baby dies. Oh, dude, mate.
Only you is
Tears.
Hardball when G-Baby dies. Everyone's having a cut. Oh, yeah, you've seen Hardball. When G-Baby dies, everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't know what the words you just said are. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I know what fucking Hardball is. No one, when they're having these lists of movies that made you cry when you were younger, do you think there is a single list on Earth which has Hardball on it?
My list.
Your
when
list.
G-Baby died, it broke me, dude.
I tell you what we didn't mention at the start, I used the famous guy, because I was going to use the whole quote with...
Oh, no. I knew you were going to do if you build it.
Well, yeah, you kind of have to. Yeah. I wanted to do Is This Heaven? No, It's Iowa. I love that sequence.
Oh, that's great, yeah.
But it is maybe one of the most misquoted lines in cinema. You think about, I think the line, if you build it, he will come, is arguably more famous, certainly over here in the UK, than the film itself in many respects. Everybody misquotes it as if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, it's
everybody. It's he will come. Yeah. It was quoted to us like when we posted this online. Everybody who immediately like, oh, what film is this? Everyone goes to that quote. Everyone got it wrong. But I was even my wife did the same, and I didn't want to be
listeners, you're stupid as fuck. Get it right, Jesus.
I know, sort your lives out. No, but you think that the obvious one is like Star Wars, that one of the most famous quotes of all time. Everyone misquotes it.
I am your father, which is the misquoted one, isn't it?
Yeah. And with this, it actually rolls off the tongue. Like if you build it, they will come. It just when you've watched the end of the film, you're like, oh yeah, it's a whole baseball team. But really, obviously, it's about his father. But I don't know where I was going with this now. I had this whole thing. I think I kind of got caught up with the whole top 5 Costner movies, which was going to lead into the top 5 baseball movies. And the fact that this probably belongs on the list, I think, alongside, again, I suspect people in the UK wouldn't have watched it because it's not as popular over here, but because it really is a baseball movie, but it's secretly a film about feminism and sex. I was talking about Bull Durham, sorry.
Okay. I know it's not. I know this is a movie about, but it has baseball as the core narrative. Mm-hmm. But it's not a baseball movie, in my opinion.
But it would still be on any list.
I appreciate that.
I think, like I said earlier, though, I really do think because of the way it embraces the history, I totally agree with you 100%. Structurally and narratively, this isn't a baseball. It isn't a baseball film because it's not a sports film. But in many respects, it's the most baseball thing ever, despite the fact that it's always also a ghost story.
It's always part of the narrative. Because one of my favorite, interactions in this film is Ray and Moonlight Graham as Dr. Archibald Graham. Mm-hmm. The quote that they have together, the line, one of the lines that they say together, 50 years ago, for 5 minutes, you came this close. It would kill some men to get so close to their dream and not touch it. God, they'd consider it a tragedy. So Ray's talking about baseball wholeheartedly. You came so close and it didn't work. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's saying, yeah, baseball's fine, but son, if I'd only gotten to be a doctor for 5 minutes, now that would have been a tragedy.
Oh, no.
So they're talking about the baseball side of it. Like baseball is playing through this film. It is the lifeblood of this film. But they're changing on its head all the time. Baseball's all right. Baseball's fine. But I got to live my life and do other things. And I love it. I would never go back and change it. And then 30 seconds later, he becomes a kid again, so he can go back and change it. It's weird.
Well, yeah, it is one of those things. He literally says in the film when he's in the car on, let's be clear, one of the longest drives ever. They drive from Boston. This is Kevin Costner's Ray Kinsella and James Earl Jones. They drive from Boston to fucking Iowa and then up to Minnesota. I drove last year from Boston up through Massachusetts and into New York State and got as far as Buffalo, and then went up into Canada and went around the other way. But it's so fucking far, and then you've got to go a whole nother stretch to get past Chicago, then get up to Iowa, and they're also casual about it. And he's driving around in that piece of shit 60s VW. They must have been driving for 7 days. It's an absolute monster
I had that
of a drive.
Down. He made not an argument. One of his things with Annie to letting him go was he will sleep in the car, he will beg for food. Not mentioning nearly $1,000 is probably going to take on petrol.
80s. This is a different time, wasn't it? So it would have been absolutely fine. But yeah, it's a long-ass drive, needless to say. But I think I just want to bring this up to bring it back just because I want to mention a movie in the same way they were saying, you have to watch Open Range. I was thinking about, the best baseball movies. And as I said, Bull Durham and Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner, those films back-to-back. Bull Durham, is a film that everyone should watch, even if you're not into baseball, kind of like this. But they sit along The Sandlot, which you already mentioned, Major League, which is a big favorite of yours.
Oh, huge fan.
The Natural with Robert Redford is one I absolutely adore. And I think back to when I was younger, it was I wasn't into baseball necessarily because you couldn't watch baseball over here, but I had an interest in the imagery and the iconography of baseball because of the movies, because it lends itself so well. And that's
it. I wasn't a huge fan of the sports. American football. I later became a fan of American football, but I've always been a huge fan of sports movies. So we won't talk about the American football will be here all day for those films. But in regards to baseball, even films such as Scout or The Scout with Brendan Fraser, great film. Absolutely. Yeah. I remember it being a great film. I haven't watched it in a long time. But Major League, as you've already said, Hardball, as I've already mentioned, these films, baseball just gives you something
It's something intangible about baseball, because I've always made the argument that American sports, for instance, and they all work better than British European sports, like soccer, we'll say soccer to differentiate them, doesn't work well on screen because it's a more fluid sport. Whereas with American sports, you can be like, all right, NFL, you can be like, well, it's like there's 10 seconds left on the clock, it's fucking 3rd and 1, and you can set it up on the line and everything. With a baseball, it's bottom of the 9th, you got your last batter up, he hits a home run, the natural, for instance. He hits the home run, it hits the lights, everything explodes, the team's won. Even basketball to a certain extent. But baseball has that extra level of intangible something which makes it so inherently cinematic. And one of my favorite movies, because there's just a vibe to it, Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some from 2016.
Absolutely fantastic film.
Of my favorite films of like the last 10 years. And it's super low key and it sneaks up on you. It's one of those films like this. It's simultaneously it's one of the best college movies I've seen, one of the best baseball movies I've seen, and it's just one of the best being young movies. And if you ask someone what it's about, like the plot hardly exists, and it doesn't matter. It's all about vibe, and that is, I think, what baseball is about to a certain extent. Like you said, the romanticism, the nostalgia, there's a vibe to it, and it just, that timelessness of seeing those jerseys when they walk through the cornfield, it doesn't look cheesy. It's not a million miles away from the kits they wear now. It just looks right on screen. Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to the direction from, and I'm going to give him a bit of due here, Phil Alden Robinson, right? I can't think of a more beloved movie in which nobody knows who it's directed by. I love movies. I love this movie. I now love baseball. Like, I've become a big baseball guy. Before this film started, I was saying, like, wait a minute, who directed this movie? I was like, I have no fucking idea. And then I looked up his name. I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. And it's one of those strange, like, he directed Sum of All Fears and Sneakers.
I know him from Sneakers. I know he directed Sneakers, yeah.
But I can't think of another film where the level of, like, how beloved it is from the complete lack of knowledge of the director. Like, I think, the pointless test, if you asked 100 people on the street who directed Field of Dreams, nobody. You're getting those fucking zero. Like, I think you could ask 1,000 people over here, and I don't think anyone would know. It's just bizarre. I think he doesn't get any love, certainly on this side of the pond, for one of the most beloved sports movies of all time.
Sorry, I just want to bring, because you mentioned 2016. You mentioned Everybody Wants Some.
Oh, I love that film.
I've got to mention another one, and you need to watch it if you ever find it. It's 2016 again. It's called Undrafted. Right? Written and directed by Joseph Mazzello. Now, if that name doesn't mean much to you, that's the kid from Jurassic Park, the boy.
Oh, really? Yeah.
He wrote it about his brother, who was on the draft for the baseball team.
Yeah.
Didn't get in, so undrafted. So it's basically about these guys just playing the last game of their beer league baseball.
Yeah.
While talking about their friend who didn't get in.
Yeah.
And the friend comes back to play the game as well, even though now he's never going to make it to the major leagues.
The majors, yeah.
It's so good, mate. It
really
is so good. It's just the stories around this team together. It's a comedy as well. But if you ever get a chance, please watch Undrafted. It came up on Amazon Prime one day, and I thought, oh, Joseph Malone, I'll give it a go. I don't know if it's there anymore. But honestly, if you ever get it, I'm not doing it justice. It's randomly Tyler Hoechlin, who plays Superman and Lois, who is in Everybody Wants Some, is doing duty in 2016. He's doing this as well. Chase Crawford, who plays the Deep from The Boys, is in this film.
Oh, yeah.
Mazzello's in this film. Jim Belushi is in this film.
That's a stacked cast, man.
It is so good. There's other names that I would mention, like Matt Bad, that nobody else has ever heard of. But I can't, and I know that we need to go back to...
No, you get this, though, especially with American sports films. Some, they just don't make it across. There was a fantastic documentary, which I watched on the plane ride over to America, about Nolan Ryan, who 99% of people over here wouldn't have a clue he is, but he's one of the greatest pitchers in American history, relatively modern as well. And it was so compelling that I dragged my poor wife to Cooperstown, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. And again, talk about amazing slices of Americana. It's this almost fake town, tiny little town, but the whole country kind of descends upon it once a year for the Baseball Hall of Fame. And of course, it's a museum as well. But all the shops are these perfect little diners or baseball stores. And it's got one of the oldest baseball stadiums, called the Sandlot, in America. And it's this perfect little ground, like in this film, but people were actually playing on it, like older people with the kids and stuff. I was like, this place is like a fucking dream. But to the point where I looked at Nolan Ryan's like plaque at the Baseball Hall of Fame. But you get these things because most people just don't have that. I think the interest in baseball over here is growing, but there are just certain movies that just haven't traveled across. Like, I'm still amazed that we managed to watch Mr. Baseball when we were younger. But yes, we do have to get back to this film.
Yeah, so we've done him a disservice. We've been talking now for coming up to nearly an hour, and only in passing have we mentioned him. Come on, James Earl Jones, dude.
Absolutely slays in this film. All the sequences, like even when like Ray first shows up at his apartment and he's obviously giving him shit like, get the hell out of my house. You can't hide the charm. He's just a charm machine. And when they're on screen together, Kevin Costner and James Earl Jones, you're willing to buy anything that they say. And it brings it back to our point earlier about the fact that on paper, this film is absolutely bonkers. You know, we'll get to the time traveling sequence in a minute. It's almost swept under the rug in this film, bizarre, despite the fact that how crazy it is. But you just kind of get on board with it. And the fact that everybody believes it and everyone has their feelings and stuff. Because you're like, well, it's Kevin Costner and James Earl Jones saying it. Yeah. And it's, you know, when I think of James Earl Jones, you know, you think most people go to like The Lion King or fucking Star Wars. I immediately think of Best of the Best.
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's like Best of the Best again.
I just always think of this. No.
Oh, he's so good. He's so good.
What I love about in this as well with his character is he's been beat down by people wanting to wanting him to fix their lives through writing, through narrative, even to the point where he's become a bit big-headed about it now. Anybody who speaks to him on the street, he honestly thinks that and maybe it is, maybe we haven't seen the fact that people keep knocking his door, but some random guy shows up, doesn't want to talk about Terrence Mann as the writer, he just wants, he has to do something with Terrence Mann. So you've got James Earl Jones threatening him with a crowbar, doing all this stuff. You get to the scene then when they go to the baseball game, and he's like, and Ray goes, well, what do you want? I want you to stop doing this. I want you to stop making me fix your lives. And he's being big-headed about what and he goes, no.
Yeah.
Do you want a beer or a hot dog?
I love that sequence as well. Like, honestly, I went to Fenway last year and I might have been sitting in the exact same seats. I swear to you, I was right. And it's an amazing ballpark. Like all the charm, I've been to other ballparks in America and they're all very good. But the more modern ones, don't get me wrong, they're better for me, being 6'7" because there's more leg room. The seats at Fenway are tiny. They're fucking tiny. So I'm sitting there, my knees are rubbing. It's not particularly comfortable. But you've got the big green monster. So
Fenway is the one with the big green. I was going to call it green meanie, but green monster.
Yeah. So it's this, and that's the one where the scoreboard they still kind of replace it like manually and stuff. It's it's again leans in like baseball more than any other sport just feels historic and nostalgia. And that stadium, alongside maybe Wrigley Field in Chicago, they're the ones that really lean into it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And seeing that sequence when they're buying the hot dogs, like the bottom of the stadium when you go in, it feels like a car park. And it's great that this was shot in 1989. I went there last year. It looks exactly the same. Exactly. We bought a hot dog downstairs as well. Exactly the same stuff. It was fucking
had to pause the Fenway Park scenes and keep looking whenever there was crowd because Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were extras, but they're not on screen. They're somewhere in that massive crowd. Yeah, just two random kids from Boston, I guess. Just
it's so fucking. I think they were actually at the game, and it's absolutely convincing. And they do a lot of things in this film where, again, you would just assume nowadays you don't even think about it. It's like it's CG or whatever. Like the final shot of this film. It's so gorgeously shot when he's, spoiler alert, playing catch with his dad. And make no mistake, nobody's voice breaks like Kevin Costner's. He does the same thing in Man of Steel when he's a young kid. He's like, am I your son? He's like, like the way he responds to it, he always just does this little voice crack. And like that's why Costner get paid the big bucks, man. Yeah. He's just he's got that something which pulls at the heartstrings. But supposedly the whole town agreed in Iowa to turn off their lights for that sequence so that when they're playing catch and they pan the camera up, it's all dark. And not only that, you see this huge line of cars. That's not CG. Those are fucking cars. Those are the town people. It's amazing.
Two things I want to bring up. You've already mentioned the car, so I'll bring that up and then I'll go straight into my next question. So Gabby's already said, and Terrence did as well, they'll come from miles, they'll pay just to see the baseball. And You could see that
great. Again, we just, sorry to bring it up. We mentioned the film like this. Everyone has their great speech in this film.
And
James Earl Jones
fantastic.
is, please, people will come, Ray. Amazing sequence.
And so you see that, you see the cars coming. Mm-hmm. Where are they going to park at night? The baseball players have already gone. So I had the question about where they're parking. Are they waiting all night, or are they being sent home until tomorrow? So and then before that, then the ghosts, right? We haven't really mentioned the ghosts.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
So where they're coming from, limbo, from baseball heaven? Where are they coming from?
They're coming from heaven.
Okay, so are they? Because then they're taking Terrence Mann back to heaven, but he's not dead because he's coming back to write the story of what he's seen.
Well, that is an important part of this film, and it plays into the whole idea again that this is a ghost story rather than a baseball film. You know, you get the questions: where do they go? Why the baseball field? Who is the voice? An amazing fact about that, literally nobody knows who the voice is. And I don't mean just in the movie. Nobody knows, except for the director and obviously the person who voiced it. Nobody knows who actually did the voice, which is, I just love the fact that is.
Oh, sorry, because they hint that it is Shoeless Joe that does it. But it's...
Yeah, but it's like in the film, it's never stressed who the voice is. But then in real life, it's like, if you look at the credits at the end, it just says the voice as himself.
And so I get that. I get you don't know who the voice is.
So nobody knows who the voice is. Yeah,
but in the film, it's Shoeless Joe because he says it was you all along.
Yeah, well, they, like for a while you do have the question there, but like there's a whole bunch of things, and this kind of comes back to the whole idea where people have feelings like, how does he know that? Why do they suspect this? And it just keeps moving along. You've got to play by the horror ghost story rules, because the best horrors and ghost stories, they succeed by not over-explaining things. As soon as you start explaining things, you lose either the magic, as it would be in this instance, or the fear, because whatever's in your head is always scarier than what they eventually show you. And in this film, obviously, it's not about being scared, but that magical sense of what this could be or what that is, it's there in your head throughout the film. And if they tried to over-explain it, something would totally be lost. And it totally leans into this idea that, again, this is a ghost story first, baseball movie second, I think. I'm glad they don't over-explain it personally, but yeah, there are a lot of if you start like asking too many questions in this film, it kind of falls to pieces.
Yeah, so I don't need full explanations. I just need a bit more narrative about how somebody like Terrence Mann can go to heaven and come back like that. Yeah, no, I get it. Like,
sorry, I've got my long-winded way of saying I don't fucking know.
No, I get it, but I guess that's going to be my one thing to change is the narrative just at the end.
Yeah.
I do when they go into the field for the first time and you got that one guy going, "I'm melting," like it's so good, and yeah, it could easily switch to horror. It could be if Stephen King wrote this film.
Yeah.
Like you would have He Behind the Rose just popping out of everything. But I get it. You don't need a lot of narrative. And I appreciate that. I just need something towards the end about why he had to go and ease Terrence Mann's pain. No, not Terrence Mann. Was it? Yeah, it was ease his pain. So it was Terrence Mann's pain he had to ease. And then why they get to take him through to the baseball, to wherever they're going, baseball heaven. But then it's hinted at that he's going to come back. When I come back, I'll write the story. Blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think he feels like, like he's already said, like he's tried this, you can see he's at his happiest almost when he's writing about like the local people.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing, like he's totally stuck in this, like everybody wants him to be this person. And it's like, they can make him something completely different. It's almost like, like he says, like, oh, imagine the story I'll come back and tell. Like, this is what heaven's like. These are ghost ball players. He'll be famous for the thing that he totally loves, kind of thing.
I have images of Ray cutting the rest of his corn down to make a car park for those millions of cars coming down. And just finding Terrence Mann's dead body. Like they've just they pushed him through the rows, and then Shoeless Joe was just taking him out.
Well, that's the thing. It's another one of those things. Like, could you make this movie now? With there would just be too many questions. Like, why wouldn't you film things? There would be all the technology aspect. Of course, the other issue is, would this work? To our modern cynical sensibilities. This film is fundamentally quite cheesy. Again, as we mentioned, it gets away with it because of the cast, because of good storytelling. But I'm not sure if you make this film now. I just beyond, even if you set it in the 80s and you remove the technology issue, which would be a massive problem if you tried to, base this in the modern day. But the whole cynical aspect of it, people look at it on the page and go, you can't, that just doesn't fucking work.
You're not making...
You've almost got to imagine James Earl Jones. Oh, well, unless James Earl Jones was reading this, then it might fucking work.
You're not making this film now because this film is timeless. There's nothing that sets this film in the 80s aside from, I guess, the vehicles.
And maybe the bearded corporate dude, Annie's brother.
Yeah, okay. I mean, you could replace him with William Atherton from Die Hard.
Yeah, exactly. He could be any 80s.
Oh, he could be Walter Peck.
He's arguably the most 80s thing in the movie, I think.
Yeah, I totally get, but it is timeless, and obviously it is because you have the time travel aspect of it. They went back to the 50s for Doc Graham, things like that. I appreciate it as well. We're going to need to move on.
We have to talk about that before we move on, right? The way they kind of just bury the lead, like they're in the hotel room. There's James Earl Jones and Kevin Costner. He walks out and suddenly he's gone back in time. Ray's gone back in time to the 70s. You have the whole interaction with Burt Lancaster's character, Shoeless Moonlight Graham. And then, obviously, like you said, he turns him down. Then the ghost from the 30s or the 20s, he suddenly shows up in their car. So he's a ghost that turns into another ghost, which includes not only ghost time traveling, but Ray. Like the fact that Ray time travels, like there's one thing he's been seeing ghosts, sure, but then all of a sudden he goes back in time to the 70s. He just brushes that shit off. It's just like, no big deal. I guess it's been that kind of week. That is, without question, if you stop and think about it, the weirdest part of film is the Moonlight Graham sequence.
Also, young Moonlight Graham, played by Frank Whaley. Yeah, Frank Whaley. Young Moonlight Graham is able to be young Moonlight Graham. Fine. He's in the car. He's fine. He goes onto the baseball pitch. He's fine. But if he steps back off the baseball pitch, then all of a sudden he's old Moonlight Graham.
It is one of those weird things. I get the idea that if he steps off the baseball field, what he's doing is visibly or symbolically giving up on baseball, that dream to be the doctor. Yeah. But then all of a sudden what you've got is a time-traveling ghost doctor from the 70s walking onto the bit. Like, why can dead Moonlight Graham from the 70s step out of the field? Like you said, as soon as you start asking questions, it doesn't make any sense. But the first 5 times you watch this film, you probably won't ask any questions because it's all so fucking charming.
I would watch that TV show you just made up, Time Traveling Ghost Doctor. I'd watch that shit.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, there is so much more I could talk about this film. But yes, we really do have to move on, otherwise it'll be here all fucking day. Oh, wait, sorry, just before we move on, I love the fact that you have all the baseball players at the end. Like, you know, they all died. It's their dream to be baseball players again. There was one dude who died and like, I wish I could be an umpire.
I wanted to be an umpire. You know what happened to him? He was happy in heaven. And they were like, no, man, we need a ref. You're coming with us. No,
dude, all you did was give me shit. I don't want to be a fucking umpire again. I'm in heaven. Dude, no, we need an umpire. The games just won't work. Jesus fucking Christ.
You know where it is?
Right, fair enough.
Do you know where it is? That's their heaven. That's his hell.
Oh, I think it might be at the very least purgatory. If being an umpire or a referee isn't purgatory, I don't know what the fuck is. All right, we need to move on to favorite sequence. For me, I think it is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. The first scene with Shoeless Joe, Karen, like there's a man on your lawn, and he goes outside and just sees Ray Liotta's character, Shoeless Joe, just standing there, and you get just the way it's perfectly shot. The cinematography by John Warwick Lindley is absolutely gorgeous. And we have to mention, sorry, it is one of my favorite things, and I cannot believe we went the whole podcast and didn't mention it, is just how important James Horner's score is to this film. Capturing that essence of magic which runs all the way through the film. I don't want to be as bold to say it's his best work, given the fact that he scored the likes of Alien, Titanic, Braveheart, Wrath of Khan, and Apollo 13, but it comfortably belongs in that, you know, in that company. I think it's that good. Like I said, I'm not saying it's his best, but there's something about those 3 little piano keys which are oddly magical. And obviously James Horner was an absolute, you know, fucking genius when it comes to movie composition. But I think this is one of his best. And like I said, essential, like to bring it back to that sequence, I'm not sure if that sequence works without the score, which is fantastic.
I'm my favorite scene. I'm gonna bring it down a little bit because, as you've already said, it's okay this day and age for men to cry. I haven't seen this film for years, especially since before my father passed. My father passed 6 years ago, So, Dad, you want to have a catch?
Oh, yeah. I get you.
Yeah. It kind of got me, dude. Yeah.
There's two sequences which really pull the hamstring. There's the bit where Moonlight Graham walks across the boundary. I think that's really effective. But yeah, again, Kevin Costner, the whole like the way his voice breaks. Do you want? And again, it brings back to this idea that this movie really is a father and son story above all else.
Which makes me think: did he always know? Because he comes up and says, "Thank you for building the baseball field." Mm-hmm. Did he always know he was his dad? Or was I think the ghost like, what do you call me, Dad? That's weird.
It's one of those weird things because like narrative, the way they're talking about it, it doesn't really make sense, and he doesn't have that knowing look. But when he calls him Dad, it's almost like he just realizes kind of thing. So we'll put it down to like so many things in this film, ghost logic. But I have to throw in one extra scene, and we did mention it. It's the James. I could pick like 7 scenes. I love this film. James Earl Jones giving his famous speech that Ray, people will come.
Like, his voice, man. Ray,
it's like again. That sequence, that speech, it shouldn't work. But because it's James Earl Jones and because it's baseball, it just fucking does. So I had to give a special mention.
Oh, no, I get it. And it's like, he's simpatico as well with Gabby. Because she's the daddy, people will come. And then he's just like, yeah, I'll double down on this shit, Ray. People will come.
Yeah, and it's great. Like Vince Scully is an incredibly famous commentator from baseball. He commentated from like the 50s up until like I think 2017, 18. And a few months before he retired, he actually, for like a video blog, basically recreated that speech. And you just realize how perfectly it encapsulates baseball. Yeah. But you could make an argument as well for the final sequence of Shoeless Joe for Burt Lancaster, because this was his last cinematic role. I think he was in like 3 like TV series or something like that. Yeah. But this is his goodbye to cinema is him walking into a cornfield and disappearing. It's like
Shoeless Joe going, rookie, you were good. Like,
it's up there with Orson Welles dying as Unicron as the greatest cinematic farewell in history.
We're gonna have to just for you, but me as well. We're gonna have to say, right, favorite scene, the whole fucking film, apparently.
So, I have picked a few things. So okay, so we'll go to. Yeah, loves Costner, but the whole cast. Number 2, I mentioned briefly the cinematography by John Warwick Lindley. The way he shoots Iowa in the sun setting. Baseball is an inherently romantic sport, and that's why I think this movie, well, theoretically could be about any sport, really has to be about baseball, as I mentioned. The fact that they built the baseball field to, face the sun so they could always capture the quote-unquote magic hour, which, they couldn't do with CG, and it just looks better when it's fucking real. And number 3, the premise. It's bonkers, but it works. So those are my 3 loves.
For me, Ray is fantastic in this film. I think Kevin Costner does really well. James Earl Jones, I took us 45 minutes to basically mention him, but he is great in this film.
Fantastic, yeah.
He's absolutely great. I mean, I want to mention the whole cast because I'd love to mention like Ray Liotta, even though I think he's going to murder everyone down. There's definitely a director's cut where he has just burnt everything down. It's become like
the horror version. Yeah, totally.
But I've got to say, the way it looks, as you just mentioned, the magic hour, the way the baseball, I keep calling it field or pitch. I don't know which one's right. The way the baseball diamond looks amongst the cornfield, I think it looks great. That ending scene where it would be a drone this day and age, where it's just you see him playing catch, and then you just see the car, the headlights.
Supposedly the actor who played his father, whose name I've forgotten off the top of my head, and I shouldn't because he wrote a book based on this, which we'll get to in Legacy.
Wire Brown.
Thank you very much. He was supposedly terrified of that sequence because he was like, he was wearing one of those like old school gloves. And he's like, I can't drop the ball. Like they're playing catch. You got all those cars in the background. The tanner turned off. You got the shot. And it's like, it's one of those low key things. But if he drops the ball, he's fucked it basically. It's like I love that sequence earlier where it's the first sequence with Shoeless Joe and Kevin Costner when he tries to hit the baseball and he misses it, and it's one of those like low-key anxiety dreams for guys. Like over here in the UK, what it is say there's a bunch of kids playing football, especially 5-a-side, and there's a fence. The ball goes over, goes to you, and you have a massive decision in that moment. You don't realize, but it's there. Do I kick the ball back or do I throw it? Now throwing it back is the safe option. Kicking it is what you want to do, but if you fuck that kick, oh my god, the embarrassment.
How many times has that happened to you and you've bottled it and just picked it up and gone, there you go?
100%. You see the kids, especially if they look like cool kids or something, like, oh dude, the young team are going to slaughter me if I fuck this kick up. And especially if you're with your wife. Oh, forget about it. Fucking forget about it.
You missed the third option. Walk away and pretend you didn't see the ball.
Yeah, his wife's like, you're not going to kick this ball back. I didn't see a football. Just keep moving. Keep moving. Oh, fucking God. It's just not worth the risk. Hates. I'd argue that Ray traveling back in time stretches things a bit. I mean, it gets away with it, but only just. To the fact that the US just isn't as magical as this movie suggests, which is a bit of a shame. And number three, the fact that the Postman and the Waterworld and Waterworld bombing deprived us, as I mentioned earlier, at least a decade of Kevin Costner as a leading man in a movie, which is such a shame. I mean, those films are bad. I know some people go to bat, no pun intended, for Waterworld. But Waterworld and The Postman are bad films, and it's such a shame.
Postman over The Waterworld is terrible. I mean,
Postman is that's the thing.
Like just the way you did the Waterworld. Postman over Waterworld is absolutely terrible. Mm-hmm. I mean, Waterworld I've seen a few times. I'll probably watch a few times more, but I wouldn't say it's good.
I tried rewatching it. It's not the worst film in the world. It's just not good. It's ill-advised, ill-conceived, dare I say. But to follow that up with The Postman, Jesus Christ, that is a rough fucking watch. And yeah, it totally torpedoed what was at the time one of the, he was one of the most famous actors in the world at the time.
Yeah.
It was like Tom Hanks kind of came in 80s lunch in the mid-90s, but from like the mid to late 80s through to like early 90s, like Kevin Costner was one of the guys. And then obviously a lot of those roles he would have taken up, I guess, except for all those baseball roles, that's what Tom Hanks ended up getting. There is a different world where, Waterworld and The Postman are good, and then Kevin Costner goes on to do fucking Saving Private Ryan or something like that. But, it is what it is.
Right. I'm not going to do your cop-out thing and say what I hate about this
film.
Were
I want to apologize. Two of those were total cop-outs.
So I'm going to Timothy Busfield as well. These are cop-outs, but within the film. They did these characters so well, that's why you hate them. Timothy Busfield as Mark. I don't like that guy.
Yeah.
Lee Garlington, who plays Beulah, the angry PTA mother. I fucking hate her. She is.
Yeah, she's awful. Brilliantly horrible. Yeah. We're both bottling. You can tell we both rather like this film, that we're struggling somewhat.
Yeah. And if I've got to, the weird timey-wimey of the time travel. I mean,
I think they're aware of it.
But
the fact that it's kind of swept under the rug suggests that they're like this.
I mean, I'll overencompass it. The fact that there's no explanation about a lot of the things that are happening in this film. It's just
that is the thing. It makes me want to actually go back and read the book.
I had that written down. Yeah.
Like, is a lot of this stuff? It's kind of like the same reason Stephen King, for instance. We're both Stephen King fans. Not all of his work translates well to the screen, and it's not his fault. It's the nature of translating any book to the screen, is that you've got to make the changes. And The Shining is always the perfect example. I know I'm not bringing this up because you just like The Shining, but it's like the perfect example of a director knowing it's like, we can't take this wholesale from the page to the screen because it just doesn't work. And you need to have. It was the reason that It's Chapter 2 didn't work. It was too literal a translation of the book, and it needed to move away from that. And it needs a stronger director. And I'm not sure what the case is here. I don't want to speak to this example because I haven't read the book, but some of the stuff where you're like, I'm not sure if that makes sense. I suspect it probably does on the page.
What was the name of the book? Was this Shoeless Joe and Me?
No, it's just called Shoeless Joe. Okay. Like I said, it was a short story called Shoeless Joe Jackson Goes to Iowa. And then it was so well liked, I think somebody encouraged him to turn it into a full novel, despite the fact that the writer, whose name I will pick up in Legacy, had never written a novel, but put it together in less than a year. And then even then, they struggled to get it to the screen because this was a labor of love for the director, Phil Alden Robinson. Like, he wrote the screenplay as well, didn't just direct it. And it was pushed back a lot initially because people just didn't think it was going to be commercial enough. And I get it. On the page, you're like, is this going to work? Fuck knows. It did, but you can see why it was considered something of a long shot.
Yeah. Right, what's next?
Alternative titles.
Yep. I am totally prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That wasn't, to use a pun again, that wasn't a curveball.
Nope, not at all.
No.
Right, so basically it is a field of dreams in a lot of countries. We've only got a couple. So in France, you have To the End of the Dream.
That's terrible.
Yep. Greece, Barefoot Joe.
What? Why would you? I mean, he did. I mean, they do mention in the film that the reason he was called Shoeless Jackson was because of the whole he took his shoes off. Yeah. But why would you? That is bananas.
Hungary, Baseball Dreams. Italy, The Dream Man.
Terrible.
Lithuania, Dreamfield.
That's okay.
Norway, Heroes of the Past.
No, sounds like a war movie.
Romania, baseball field.
Come on, Romania. You can do better than that, for the love of God.
Ukraine, Field of Miracles.
That's fine. It sounds a little bit more Disney, but it's okay.
And that's it, basically. And the rest is just Fields of Dreams. Oh, no, Taiwan, Dreams Come True.
Oh, that's garbage as well. Do you have any, there are tons of facts to this film, so you're going to have to handpick a couple.
Well, I already gave you the one I liked about basically Burt Lancaster making Mark his bitch. Timothy Busfield his bitch. That was quite good. After the filming was completed, the family that owned the farm kept the field and added a small hut with inexpensive souvenirs for sale. As of 2018, visitors were free to come to the field and play baseball as they pleased between April and November.
Yeah, it's weird because I think you have to pay to be able to play baseball, but people go out onto the field, and I actually want to go there because it's not a million miles from, basically I'm tricking my wife. So I'm going to plan it as a trip to Chicago. And I know Iowa's absolutely massive, but it's on the east side of Iowa. So it's only, I think it's like a 3-hour drive from Chicago. And I'm like, I have to visit this place. But yeah, it was built over 2 guys' farms. I forget them. Jesus, it's like the Lansing family and the Anskamp family, I think it's called. I've definitely mispronounced their name. But it was built over the 2 properties because, again, as we mentioned earlier, they wanted to capture the sky perfectly. And only one of the families initially turned it into a money-making scheme. The other one turned it back into a farm, like the right field. But eventually, obviously, it's turned around and go, wait a minute, they're making an absolute fortune and have jumped on board as well. So, yeah, you can go there now. The 4 works. And, yeah, who wouldn't want to visit that? If you're a fan of the movie or a baseball
It's amazing that still stands now. Basically, a little film that started off being a little film has just become, you can still go.
Well, I mean, we'll go into the legacy of how big a deal it's become now. But, I mean, that's what happened. They built the baseball field and then they just fucked off and just left the baseball field, which is amazing.
All right, so Shoeless Joe.
It's like the awesome version of the Popeye thing in Malta, whereas that was shit. This is really fucking dope.
Right, Shoeless Joe remarks about Ty Cobb's desire to play at the Field of Dreams. None of us could stand the son of a bitch when he was alive, so we told him to stick it. In real life, the players were very close friends. In Jackson's later life, when he ran a liquor store in South Carolina, Cobb stopped there to buy bourbon. During the sale, Jackson made no sign of recognition to Cobb until Cobb finally said, "For God's sake, Joe, don't you remember me?" Jackson somberly replied, "Well, sure, I remember you, Ty. I just didn't think anyone wanted to remember me anymore." That's a bit sad, dude.
It is a little bit sad, isn't it? I actually quite like that scene because I know it's kind of, all we think about when we watch the screen is there's Ray Liotta being evil Ray Liotta, but there is a certain guy's charm, almost like they were just doing it to be dicks. Oh, we didn't fucking invite Ty Cobb, but he'd probably I get the impression maybe he'd be there tomorrow kind of thing. It had that kind of vibe to it.
There was an actual Archibald Moonlight Graham. The people Terrence Mann is interviewing at the bar were people who knew the real Doc Graham. They found out about the movie and the inclusion of Doc Graham's character. They drove from Chisholm, Minnesota to Iowa. The stories the men shared were actual stories about Doc Graham. That's nice.
That is awesome.
Apparently, the guy that owned the local bar is like you. Didn't have a clue who Amy Madigan was. Amy Madigan was offered the job as a bartender at a local bar during filming. The owner did not know Madigan was an actress.
Fantastic.
The movie's
makes me feel better about my oversight, in fairness.
The movie's line, "If you build it, he will come," was voted number 39 out of 100 by the American Film Institute.
Of greatest quotes of all time, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, movie quotes. I'm not going to say greatest quotes, yeah.
Burt Lancaster was 74 at the time of filming. As you said, this was his last cinematic film.
Yeah, he died 2 years later, I think.
Yeah. The field was constructed over the July 4th weekend under the direction of the Los Angeles Dodgers groundskeeper. And one more then. The shot of the line drive knocking over the bag of baseballs next to Kevin Costner was sheer luck off the bat of Ray Liotta.
Oh, yeah, you can totally tell. You can there's no way he nailed that shot. They're obviously filming from behind. It's okay. And he just kind of stayed in character, which is cool.
Oh, one more. You can enter the coordinates 42 degrees 2951.8 north, 91.318.4 west in Google Maps for the location of the field built for the film.
That is very cool. That is very cool. I absolutely, like, let's be clear. If I can drag my wife to Cooperstown to go to the Baseball Hall of Fame, I can drag her to the Field of Dreams in Iowa. It'd be a cool place to visit as well. In terms of legacy, very much a few things which you already mentioned in facts, but in 1990, Keith Ray, a neighboring farmer, put together a baseball team dubbed Ghost Players. Are you okay there, champ? So my wife is just eyeballing me here. Oh, there we go. I think I'm in trouble now. Dubbed Ghost Players to entertain visitors at the field. The team's presence at the field on Sunday afternoons once a month attracted thousands of additional fans to the field. In 1991-1992, the Upper Deck Company sponsored a celebrity game at the field. Executive producer Tony Lacano, I can't pronounce his name, who later received the key to the city, brought Hall of Famers like Bob Gibson, Reggie Jackson, and Bob Fellas take on Hollywood stars like Kelsey Grammer and Meatloaf in a charity game. The two games raised over $100,000 for local charities, which I thought was very cool. In 2002, book by author Brett H. Mandel, Is This Heaven? The Magic of Field of Dreams, chronicles the story of how the once make-believe location has been turned into a real and tangible place, in case you have more interest in it. Now, the MLB, there's like a game every season now called MLB at the Field of Dreams. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I've got it recorded. The first one was a couple of years ago. And obviously for the first game, they had the White Sox as designated as the home team, and they were playing the Yankees because I guess it's just iconic. But it was unbelievable because it's at the Field of Dreams. They make a temporary stand for a very select number of fans. And at the start of the game, Kevin Costner walks out of the fucking cornfield, gives a speech to, like, the small number of fans in the field, and then both teams, the White Sox and the Yankees, walk out via the cornfield. And with the music from James Horner and everything playing, I'm like, fuck me, this is so cool. And now it's become a thing. So once a season, they have a game at the Field of Dreams with different teams. Obviously, the first one was the best one because it had Costner there and all that jazz. But I was like, that is so fucking cool that they've done that. What was I going to say? We've already talked about, whether this is the best baseball movie, best sports movie. I think it's in the conversation, despite the fact that it's not a traditional sports movie, but I think it's that beloved. You mentioned it earlier, Dwyer Brown. He wrote a book as well, If You Build It, a book about father's fate and the Field of Dreams. He played Ray's father in the movie. The book supposedly delves into Dwyer's career as an actor, his experience on the set of Field of Dreams, and his relationship with his father. But it's supposedly the making of the movie changed his relationship with his father, who died shortly before filming began. So the whole idea, like the story being about fathers and sons, and a ghost story to a certain extent, it kind of plays into that. I love the idea that, an actor, it's such a big part of his life and such a tumultuous period in his life that he turned it into a book. And it's a weird one because I was like, how big of a hit was this film? It was a solid hit, 84.4 million off a 15 million budget, but this film has had such a massive shelf life. Like, it just still gets played to this day. And to your point made, must have been 7 hours ago. It feels like we've been rattling on for ages now. The fact that this film is so timeless in so many respects means it's very easy to go back to. And as we mentioned a couple of times, the movie is based on the book Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella, which is also based on his own short, Shoeless Joe Jackson Comes to Iowa. So yeah, that's the legacy chat.
Can I bring up some legacy?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So there was a television series proposal in 2021. Plans were announced to remake the film as a television series produced by Lawrence Gordon and written by Michael Schur for Peacock. But in June 2022, it was revealed that it was no longer moving forward. But good. Yeah, I don't think it would have worked as a TV series. It'd basically just be like Quantum Leap, where he's just traveling, trying to get people to come to the baseball field.
You almost don't want it to be any longer because, like you said, as soon as you start, the temptation would be to over-explain things and stuff. And as I said, it wouldn't work in the modern day. I don't want to see it set in 1989, and it's just unnecessary because, as we already mentioned, it's very easy, especially with a HD transition, to go back and watch this film. It still looks fantastic. You don't need a fucking remake. Just leave it where it is.
What about a sequel? In 2011, there was a sequel, Field of Dreams 2. Taylor Lautner played Iowa Farmer. Kevin Costner played Iowa Farmer's dad.
Taylor Lautner, was he the wolf boy in Twilight?
I think so. I think that's it. And Ray Liotta played a guy named Roger Goodall. I say a guy, I'm pretty sure he's famous. It's about a small town Iowa farmer who, fed up with the NFL lockout, decides to build his own football field after hearing voice instructions from beyond. Now, I will caveat, I think it's a piss take. It's only a 3-minute film, so I think it's an
that's
the NFL.
Thank God for that. That's absolutely fine. Yes, we don't need to, and that's the thing. when you're reading that out, I was laughing, but at the same time, I'm like, no, that's the same plot. And it just reminds you how bonkers and silly, really, the plot is for this film. And it's like, if you don't have Kevin Costner and you have James Lautner, whatever his name is. What's his name?
Taylor Lautner.
Taylor Lautner instead. Sorry, I do apologize. That's not me taking the piss. If you had someone like that, who I'm sure is a perfectly decent actor, but he's not Kevin Costner, it just doesn't work.
No.
So if you're going to make one change for this movie and only one, well, I usually get a bit carried away. And even now I'm like, I think I've got two.
I'll go first before you go.
No, I've got it. All right. I thought it would be the time travel stuff, but that would deprive us Burt Lancaster. And it's, as I mentioned, it's already stuck in so seamlessly. So the easy answer and the genuine answer is Annie's corporate brother is a tad heavy-handed. There's just no two ways about it. It's the worst part of the film. And like I said, I'm not blaming the actor. It's underwritten. I think he plays a larger, and I think he is more quote unquote evil in the book. It gets pushed to the side. I'm not sad that it does get pushed to the side, because I prefer to keep the emphasis on the more positive storytelling, but that is the weakest element of the film.
Yeah, I mean, that's the right answer. But my answer is, as I've already said, I need a narrative thread for why Terrence Mann is going into the corner and how he can come back up.
Totally fair enough. Oh, and you could even bring it back to Annie's brother. Why do I keep calling him Annie's brother all of a sudden rather than his real name? Mark. Why does he suddenly see the ghost at the end? It's like, does he have that moment, like he's being so greedy, but then when Karen falls off and nearly chokes to death, like
I think it's belief.
It starts to, it's belief thing.
Yeah. So
it's like suddenly all these other things aren't so important. Family's important. All he's worried about is Karen. Yeah. And suddenly he can see the ghost.
So the question is, though, does he see the ghost, or does he see Doc actually save Karen, or does he just see Karen spit a hot dog out on her own?
I think he sees the whole kit and caboodle.
So he does see Doc just appear out of thin air. Okay.
No, I think he sees the baseball players all of a sudden.
No. All of a sudden, but before that, when does he start to believe? When does he see Doc?
I think literally as soon as he becomes
Doc.
And he's so worried because it's partly his fault and he's seen Karen choke. I think all that corporate stuff, and suddenly it just becomes about family. And I think his mind is suddenly open to the idea. I think the moment that happens, he turns around, he can see the doctor, he can see the baseball, he can see everything, basically.
Okay. All right, then. I'll give you that.
We ready to move on? Video games?
Yeah.
No video games. I'd have something like Farmville by Zynga combined with Baseball Superstars by Gameville. They're both mobile games, which usually isn't my thing, but I love Baseball Superstars by Gameville, in which you need to manage the farm, the business, and the baseball games, while also getting out on the field as the ghost team, as teams from like all over the world come to Iowa to challenge you. So things get more complex as the team gets bigger, and you have to organize contracts while maintaining the farm until you eventually, like the aim is like you keep playing more and more famous people. Like you have the game against Kelsey Grammer and Meatloaf, but the idea is that eventually you play off against, I don't know, the modern day White Sox or Aaron Judge in the 2023 Yankees. I guess it should be the Texans, because in the fact that they just won the World Series, but it's more iconic if it's the White Sox, obviously, or the Yankees. But yeah, I would have like a game where you've got to manage the two things. So you actually get to play baseball as the ghost team as you build your way up to more and more famous games, but you've got to manage the farm and the finances in the background. So it's half farm simulator, half baseball game.
You thought about that a lot, didn't you?
Well, yeah, you've crushed me for the past like 4 weeks in this section. So I say 4 weeks. No, I meant 4 months. I do apologize.
With the famous faces and the cartoonishness of you playing like dead characters and things like that, I would have like an NBA Jam-esque game.
Yeah, fair enough.
Where it's just it's cartoonish. Where
it's just dead baseball players.
Dead baseball players, but you can hit the ball. All of a sudden, the ball becomes on fire.
Yeah. And you could even have like, remember like NBA Jam back in the day, there was like secret codes where you could play as Bill Clinton. You could have that in this, but you're playing like the celebrity game, so you could play as, again, to bring it back to Kelsey Grammer and Meatloaf as one of the teams. Yeah. That'd be pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think yours wins this one, but I kind of like the idea of a cartoonish-esque.
Even then, if I've won by decision. It's not been like yours the last couple of weeks, so I've been absolutely smoked. Ratings and recommendations. Unsurprisingly, yes, I do recommend this film. This is a really weird one for me, because I think of all the films we've covered, this is one of the hardest for me to rate objectively, because I love this film so much, and I have such fond memories of it. My heart wants to give this a 5 stars. My head wants to give it 4 stars. And I am going to settle on 4 stars. Again, it's a very, very strong 4 stars. It's one of the most, like, I would recommend this to anyone. Like you said, totally timeless. It doesn't matter if you don't like baseball. It's such a feel-good film with such a fantastic cast. But yes, if you do start picking at certain threads, it gets a little bit wishy-washy with the screenplay. So I'm going to give it 4 stars, but a massively recommended 4 stars from me.
It's a huge recommendation from me as well. Like, I mean, you don't have to like baseball, which no. Baseball is a non-movie sport. Like,
yeah.
I'm not a fan of, but I love the sport within movies. Mm-hmm. I think baseball just carries so well over to film. So even though I don't class this as a sports film or a baseball film, it's I don't know. To be fair, I don't know what it is. Aside from going with what you said,
time traveling ghost film.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to let my head rule over my heart rule over my head. I'm going to give it a 5.
I totally get that. I really did go back and forth on this. I settled on 4, but even as I was saying 4, I'm like, I rewatched that film. I loved it as much as I ever have. And
I mean, playing devil's advocate, if you would have gone 5, I probably would have gone 4. But because
we're just providing a bit of balance.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think that's a perfect encapsulation that either of us could have got, like, both exactly on the same page here. And we often do this on the podcast. We're either totally on the same page here, but not just with the same score. Literally, both of our hearts are saying 5, both of our heads are saying 4. Or one of us is at 5 and one of us is at 1, and we disagree on everything. But again, we're on a pretty good run here where I'd say the past 7 or 8 weeks, since I think Empire Strikes Back, where obviously we went in very different directions, we've been pretty much on the same page for a lot of it. I'm sure we're going to disagree on something pretty soon.
There's plenty of films out there for you to be wrong on, so don't worry.
Here we go. Mr. I hate The Shining. Jesus Christ. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it for Field of Dreams. 4 or 5, pick your poison. It's hugely recommended, and it's still a fantastic watch. But what are we going to do next week? Surely we can't be doing another fucking ghost movie.
We are
doing another ghost movie.
So, a friend of the show who collaborates with us every now and then, Dave, his daughter. So it's not my choice next week, by the way. His daughter is desperate to be on the podcast. Now, unfortunately, due to us not being able to control our language, she is not going to be on the podcast, which I think is the right decision.
I think so too.
We've let her choose next week's film. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to do is we're going to get her to let us know why she's chosen this film, why she likes it. So we're going to have a little bit of.
So she's going to be involved, but not really involved. Because
so basically, when she listens back to it, she can listen back to the part of her. So this is Amelia's choice next week, and Amelia's chosen. She's chosen it by default because we've already done number 1. So we're going to do Ghostbusters 2.
Jesus Christ, Ghost is in the title.
After
5 Halloween films and then a Ghost baseball film, we're doing Ghostbusters now. We're just going to do Ghost. It's just going to be the Ghost podcast. It's ridiculous.
There's got to be like a Ghost Christmas film. Christmas Carol.
Yeah. Most Christmas films are Ghost films, so we're almost certainly going to have Ghost for that. Yeah. Maybe we'll fill in the gap by literally doing Ghost to be incredibly on the nose. It ticks a lot of the boxes, I suppose. But I think that's going to be a really interesting choice because, for obvious reasons, people feel very, I don't know, it's one of those films where obviously it's not as good as the original, and you have the issue that you immediately compare it to the original, which is an unflattering comparison, to say the least.
Which is probably what we're going to do next week.
Of course we will, but then you also want to judge it on its own merits, where there's some really fun stuff in Ghostbusters 2, despite the fact that it's not nearly as good as the first.
And
so
I think
it's going to be interesting to go back to.
What I think Ghostbusters 2 does well is that is more of a kid-orientated film, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see. So Amelia's 9. So it's going to be interesting to see which one she picks, which one she would prefer, 2 or 1. So I'm really interested to see.
It's weird because I remember Ghostbusters as being one of those films, when you realize you're growing up, like I always say, like, when one day I suddenly started drinking orange juice with pulp in it, for instance, like, I think I might be a grown-up. It's like,
I'm definitely not a grown-up then.
Fair enough. Well, it was like watching Ghostbusters, and then just one time, it must have been like the 12th, 13th time I'd watched that film, but I'd grown up watching it as from a really young kid. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, this whole scene's about sex. And I was just like, I didn't know. I had no idea for like a decade. And then all of a sudden I'm watching it for the umpteenth time. I'm like, oh no, he's talking about fucking her. It's just unbelievable. Whereas number 2 doesn't have any of that.
And this is why Amelia will not be joining us on the podcast.
Exactly. So yes, do join us next week, myself, Rob, and briefly Amelia, as we look back at one of the more interesting films of the late 80s, Ghostbusters 2.
We're gonna have Dave join us next week as proxy for Amelia, so he can actually talk on her behalf.
So Dave's joining us as well.
Dave's going to join us next week, as proxy for Amelia, as I said. So, so join us next week for.
Okay, so that's it, yeah. Okay, I've been Liam, this has been Rob, you've been listening to Hey Guys Podcast. See you next week. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.